Hi, Greg Ruffner on the Contact Center KPI podcast hosted by Abstract. It's a great day today. We have Dan Smitley with us, a 20-year workforce management industry expert, and we are going to be talking balancing service level versus, or maybe and, occupancy within the contact center. So Dan, please take a moment to introduce yourself, say hi.
Yeah, hey, nice to be here. Thanks for the invitation. As you said, I've been in the contact center space for 20 years, all of that basically inside of the workforce management team. I got a shot because I liked spreadsheets and I just haven't looked back. I've been able to build some teams, lead some teams, and it's been a wonderful experience. Yeah, happy to be here, man.
Cool. Well, I got to ask because most people don't, unless you're an accountant, most people don't go like, oh, I like spreadsheets.
Right.
So what was kind of like the defining moment where you're like, oh, I kind of like living in this columns and rows world?
It's honestly just how my mind works. So my career started because I was floor supervisor for a large outbound dialing kind of organization, and there was different campaigns and different lists and like different calling patterns, and we were doing it with different contact centers, and I was trying to keep everything organized. And in my mind, I'm like, this is just the easiest way to do it. There's cells and there's columns and rows, and like I can keep track of this. And that's what got me my career. I realized I might have a problem about 5 years ago when I started organizing my life with spreadsheets. It was like, I've got family and friends coming into the Charleston area. Where did I need to take them to a restaurant? Which one have I already taken them to? How good are they? What shows are my wife and I watching? Like, I literally have a list of every show and like what seasons have we completed and which ones are next. And then it was, of course, when it got to the point of like meals and restaurants, it was like dinner planning by spreadsheet. And I was like, okay, so like, maybe this is a little unhealthy at this point, but yeah, it's been a maturing love. I love me some Excel. I'll admit it.
Okay, what about so Excel versus Google Sheets?
I grew up in Excel. Their Google Sheets is fine. I think their shareability, if that's a good word for it, I think it is better. The calculations are slightly different. I'm just more comfortable in Excel, so that's where I live.
Okay, so I feel like maybe like my obsession with calendar invites and kind of running everything off my calendar might be like a gateway drug into, living your life off of Excel spreadsheets.
Okay.
Maybe it's vice versa. I don't know. But it is kind of nice to just see everything really just planned out. And there's no room for subjectivity. It's like,
hmm hmm
nope, I'm not going to this. It wasn't on the calendar. Or nope, we're not watching this. I'll show on Netflix. It wasn't in the Excel spreadsheet.
It's true. I mean, I do love a good organized kind of calendar. I've gotten my kids to start, like, my kids are in theater, and I'm like, I need you guys to put in whenever you're supposed to be there. We've got the family calendar. So, yeah, just a nice, systemized, organized environment just feels right. It feels appropriate, and like things are where they should be.
So it's a good segue because, trying to balance organization versus efficiency is kind of, our topic. So when we met to prep for our podcast, Dan, we kind of came up with this idea of balancing service level and occupancy. And so why is this something that you feel passionate and excited to talk about?
Yeah. So in workforce management circles, service level is the most obvious and common KPI. So service level is the percentage of interactions that are being handled in an appropriate amount of time. Now that appropriateness gets to be defined by the organization, defined by the line of business, the type of channel, right? Email versus chat versus call. And it ultimately just simply comes down to, did our people get to the customer fast enough? Yes, no. And there's that great metric. Um, Workforce management is centered around that. Are we putting the right people in the right place at the right time to handle the right type of interaction? That's amazing. The challenge I have with that is higher isn't better. When we're talking about service levels, we normally are talking about something like 80% of interactions being handled within a certain period of time, or 85. But if we're getting to 90, to 95, to 100% of service level, 100% of our calls coming in get answered super quickly, that's not a positive, in my opinion. That
Mm.
there is these pushes and pulls. How did we get to 100? I was with another customer not too long ago, and they had like 100% service levels over every interval over multiple days, and it was a huge red flag. I'm like, we're not looking at this comprehensively enough, because service level is just one metric, and we've got to have something else. For me, that other metric is occupancy. It's the percentage of time that agents are staying busy and productive. And I think that's the right metric to try to start counterbalancing, because high service levels aren't always a positive thing, but neither is high occupancy.
So, I mean, we may have like 100% SLA attainment, but like 50% occupancy,
Right.
and you're like half your agents sitting around. Not only are you paying them to not work,
Right.
but they're bored, and so
Yes.
they're unengaged. So your attrition's probably going to be higher. So,
And,
I mean, is that a
and
fair?
maybe the attrition's great. Maybe they're bored, but they're like, this is the sweetest gig ever, right? Like, I don't have to do anything, which is its own problem when volume starts to increase and we actually start getting busy. And they're like, what is going on? I don't understand. Like, this was such an
I
amazing
actually have to
organization.
work right now.
Yeah,
Like, this
right.
is
Oh, it was so
ridiculous.
hard. And so it just sets an unrealistic expectation. And to be honest, like, that's kind of what I was seeing from some of the interactions I've been having with other customers, is like they had these incredibly low occupancy rates. And agents were saying things like, this is the best gig I've ever had. This is an amazing, and I'm like, they have no clue what's coming. Like, they're just going to be so hard on them when it starts
Yeah.
becoming like a real job again.
Okay, so I'm sure there's a lot to unpack, more than we're going to unpack in the next 15 minutes.
Sure.
Um, but whether it's 70%, 80%, 90%, like where do you begin to draw that line between service level versus occupancy?
Yeah, so for me, it's a balancing act, right? So it's not occupancy versus service level, but it's occupancy and service level. So that when we're
Okay.
looking at service level, that is the KPI that we need to be able to say, how are we providing an experience to our customers? Is it satisfactory? Of course, there's a ton of other metrics, right? See your other episodes for other metrics around customer experience. Little plug there, but there are tons of metrics for workforce management service level is the primary metric. That's the customer experience. But what about the business experience, right? And that's where occupancy can come in. We can start to say, oh crap, it's at 40%. The business experience is junk. People are not being utilized. We have agents just sitting around. We're wasting costs. That's the business experience. What's fun for me, at least, is that occupancy is also the agent experience metric as well. So we can crank up occupancy, right? We can say, oh man, our agents are super productive. They're busy all of the time. And that's another red flag. Like, if our occupancy is 80%, 90%, what we're saying is there's only 10% of the time that our agents get to breathe. There's 10% of the time when they're not actively engaged with a customer. And that in itself can be exhausting and lead to burnout and lead to attrition. And so for me, it's this balancing act. It's an and statement. It's service level and occupancy. It's not one needs to be super high, the other one low, or vice versa. It's the appropriate balancing of those two, so the business, the customer, and the agent are all being thought of and taken care of as we're planning for what we need to do with our forecasting and scheduling.
Okay, so what about, so agent gets off the phone, they have built in, call it like wrap up time, after
Sure.
work time, right? Like, is that something that you take into account when looking at inactivity and kind of that breathing time? Because you might have a 15-minute call,
Right.
5 minutes of after work wrap up time, like that, you have breathing room there. So like, why would I not count that as the breathing room for an
Sure.
agent?
Yeah, so most softwares and most teams are going to include that ACW inside of talk time. So that's going to be part of the customer interaction, quote unquote, right? So that's going to be the full time. And so
Okay.
that is not part of the breathing room. The reason why, from my perspective, that's not sufficient is because it's still active work, right? So think about this. Let's say that you and I go back to back to back to back meetings, right? 3 hours of nonstop meetings, and you get out of a meeting 5 minutes early. That 5 minutes you take to just write up your notes. You're like, oh my God, I had action items. There's something I need to do. What did Dan tell me I had to do? So you're racking your brain, you're writing up these notes, and then you jump right into that next call. I think you would say, I didn't breathe. That was me actively engaged, trying to remember the pressure of that next meeting is coming up. I know it's right around the corner, and I haven't had a time to just stop. That's why I think ACW isn't that breathing room. ACW is still active work that is trying to digest, debrief, prep for that next call. And there's no sense of centering. There's no sense of, okay, now I'm ready. There's none of that. It is just go, go, go. That's why I think ACW is insufficient for breathing, because from my perspective, it's still work.
Okay, so I'm going to challenge you a little bit, Dan.
Awesome.
Okay.
Let's do this.
Um, I don't, I'm a contact center owner.
Mm-hmm.
I don't pay people to breathe and center themselves, right? I pay them to be on the phone and do their work and move on to the next activity. Like
Yes.
you have 16 hours outside of work
To
where you
breathe.
can breathe and recenter yourself. Like I want you busy 100% of the time.
Absolutely.
Why does that not work? Like why is that not the right way to approach things?
Well, it depends upon your value statements. It depends upon what metrics you're looking at. Your businessman that owns the contact center wants their agents 100% occupied. Cool. Your agents are going to burn out, and they're going to be out the door. And maybe you're comfortable with that. Maybe you come from this line of thinking that contact centers have super high attrition, and this is just the norm, and this is how we have to live. And the problem is that I don't think you're accounting for the attrition cost. You're not accounting for the brain, the brain loss. You're not accounting for the ramp up unproductiveness that to get an agent fully functioning, high performing, and God help you if you're in a sales environment where you're losing sales knowledge about how to convert on particular promotions. Like, yeah, you can ask your people to never stop. I don't think that is going to get you to where you need to be. For me, it's not a recipe for success. You're going to burn your agents out, and you're going to have so much brain loss and brain dump that your business will probably shut down in about 3 years. Like your attrition is going to be too high, too costly. I would rather give people time to breathe than have to constantly replace them.
So let's say, again, I'm just going to throw something out there. Let's say I have a spreadsheet and I know every 90 days I'm losing 40%. And I'm kind of doing the math backwards and I'm working my way up through recruiting and hiring. I'm looking at the total population of available talent. Like, what if I've done all that math on my spreadsheet and it still works out better for me to be okay with, I'm going to just turn and burn people?
So,
have you ever seen that actually work?
No.
No. Okay.
So in your environment, this kind of hypothetical scenario you're building out, so cool. You've accounted for attrition, great, and you've also accounted for unproductive on-ramping of the agents, right? Because again, it takes a while. If the average agent's doing 10 calls an hour, there's a ramp period to get to 10. So you've accounted for that. Awesome. You've also accounted for kind of knowledge sharing. There's the ability of higher tenured agents training up and improving those that get more efficient. You've accounted for that, and you've accounted for possible cross-selling, cross-promotion. If you've accounted for all of that, and it is still more cost-effective for you to be just burning through agents at at 40% over 90 days, so 160% attrition rate annualized. My only argument, and this is a soft argument, my only argument that is unkind.
You're not being a nice human.
It is lacking humanity. And I'm like, from my perspective, the money might be able to be there and you might be able to make a profit, but I don't see how you get people to work there. And I think you're going to run out of people. You're going to run out of leaders that want to be in leadership. You're going to run out of partners that want to be at your C-suite. You're going to run out of agents to just simply fill the spot. Your Glassdoor's reviews are going to be huge red flags to tell people never to, like, I think it could work from a financial perspective, but longevity, like Simon Sinek's kind of infinite game, I don't see you in this game. You're out. You're tapping out real fast. So good luck, because I think your value prop and your value positioning is wrong.
That's totally fair. And I do think like everybody needs a moment to breathe, right? Like 5 minutes between meetings, like. So let's talk about just a couple tactical things that folks can do to maybe try to like look at trying to find that balance, that and. So let's say I kind of walk into a new organization
Yeah.
and I have some higher than expected attrition.
Okay. Mhm.
Maybe I'm kind of walking into maybe a little bit of a negative environment where agents
Mhm.
are feeling burnt out. What are like the first two things that I could look at to try to diagnose what's going on?
The first thing you should do is a listening tour.
Okay.
Get curious. Don't assume you know why they're trading out. Do we think it might be because of no one has time to breathe? Sure. But go on a listening tour. Better understand from the agents' mouths themselves, not the supervisors, not their team leads, not their managers, the agents themselves, what's going on. And I think one question you can ask them is, why are you still here? Like, everyone else seems to be leaving. What has you in this seat? And what would it take for you to leave? Like, what would push you over the edge? And just try to get a better sense of what's going on. And then expand that listening tour to the peer set. So your marketing team, your HR team, your finance, just going around trying to better understand the environment. So you got a clear problem. We know attrition is an issue. Go around trying to understand what everyone's perspective is, because the moment you come in assuming you know exactly what to do is the moment you're wrong. Like, go figure out from everyone else what's going on and then try to pull together a more comprehensive solution, because one agent's not going to give you enough information and one HR business partner won't give you enough information.
Yeah. I mean, anybody who's a leader coming into an environment, the first thing you should do for 90 days is just listen, right? Like I can't tell you how many times I've worked for people who come in and they're trying to make changes on day one, and you're like, dude, you don't know the first thing about what's going on here.
It's
Um,
so hard. I get it. And I've coached people do the same thing, but put ourselves in their shoes. Someone just made a bet on me. I'm a new person. I just got done convincing you I'm the right person in the interviews, right? And now I got to live up to it. So you're telling me, Greg, you want me, after I've just convinced you I'm the right person for your company, now you want me to stop, not do anything, just listen? You want me to not make an immediate impact by moving, by changing, by that's so hard. So I have empathy
I
for those people.
I think that's, in a leadership position like that, though, right? As part of the interview process, you're typically asked, like, what would your first 90 days
Sure.
look like? What would your first 6 months look like? And as long as you set the expectation that, like, hey, this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to come in, I'm going to learn, I'm going to listen. And, God, I've personally been on the receiving end of leaders coming in
Mm-hmm.
and just making changes, and you're just like, what are you doing? Okay, so number one, just listen.
Yeah.
Number two, what's the second thing I could do?
The second thing you should do is, I mean, it sounds cheesy, but for me, it would be continue to build those relationships, right? So, okay, cool. We go on this listening tour. We get our arms around what's going on. We understand this is the situation, this is the problem, and we go to start fixing it. If we stop those relationships we've just started, whether it's with the agents or HR or marketing or whoever these people are that we're building these relationships, if we stop having those conversations, the effectiveness of our solution stops, right? So, like, we've solved a problem at a moment, in 3 months down the road, 6 months down the road, when let's say that the agent needs have shifted. It was, I don't, attrition's high because blah, 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 school's in session. And now it's summertime. It's a completely different problem. It's a completely different issue. And if we're not continuing to build those relationships, if we're not continuing to listen, we won't hear that, and we're going to be solving a problem that's already been solved and not even touching that new problem that wasn't here before. So for me, it comes down to going and being curious, listening, building those relationships. I personally don't understand how we support individuals without doing those first, staying curious, listening, and then continuing to build relationships. I think ultimately that is how we solve a variety of problems, especially problems around attrition.
So we come in, we learn, we listen, and then from there we understand, what does a day in the life of an agent look like? What are the actual problems in the trenches, on the phones every single day? What's actually involved in that after
Mm-hmm.
call work? Um, how much time do I actually have when I'm taking a break?
Right.
Right. So you kind of get your head wrapped around all those things. And then from there, you can be prescriptive with, hey, I think we need to add 2 agents, which will have this downstream impact on the rest of our agents. And this will be our SLA. We're going to meet or exceed this SLA by this much. But again, it all starts with listening and kind of understanding the status quo.
Exactly. That's at least that's how I see it. It feels trite. It feels overly simplified. It seems like a throwaway of just being like, go around, list, ask a bunch of questions, build relationships. But I just genuinely find change management a lot easier when you have that foundation. I just find project management a whole lot easier when you have that foundation. And so whatever that solution is, I just see it being a lot more successful when you have that foundation first.
I like it. I like it. This was good. I mean, again, I threw some kind of challenges your way, Dan, and I do think you do need to treat people like a human being. And if you are okay churning people out, it'll come back to bite you one way or another at some point in the future. And ultimately, it does all start with just listening. It's amazing. 2 ears, 1 mouth. It's so cliche, but so many problems can be solved just by listening to what's going on. So, anything that you want to add kind of as a parting thought, Dan, for our listeners around kind of how to think about balancing SLAs and kind of the workforce?
Yeah. So to the workforce managers, I would tell them, slow down. We love our efficiencies. We love things streamlined. We like our organizations. Opinions are messy. It takes a while to slow down and listen, and I think it's absolutely worth it. Your forecast accuracy will increase. Your service levels will increase. Your occupancy will improve by slowing down. So WFM people, slow down. Ops people, expect more from your WFM team. Don't be comfortable with just getting a forecast and a schedule and they go back to their corners. Pull them into the table, get them to be a strategic partner, get them invested in the success of the organization, not just their forecast accuracy. WFM can be so much more. And I say that to all of the contact centers, whether that is ops or WFM, we can do more. We just need to step our game up.
I love it. I love it. Step your game up. That's going to be the title of this podcast. Step your game up and listen.
Awesome.
All right, Dan, it was a pleasure. Thank you for joining us today. I appreciate your thoughts, insights, and your answers to my questions. Contact center world is messy, and definitely in some parts of the world, once you start getting into near shore, offshore stuff in some different parts of the world, it can be a grind. And so definitely, don't ever forget the people you're dealing with are still human beings. So thank you for your time, Dan.
This was great. Thanks so much, man.
Cool. Bye.